Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Lisa Tahir, who's here to share with us her new book, The Chiron Effect, Healing Our Core Wounds Through Astrology, Empathy, and Self-Forgiveness. Did you know it's possible to heal your core wounds? Well, today we're going to talk about just that. Our special guest today is Lisa Tahir, and she is from New Orleans, Louisiana, where she became a licensed clinical social worker in 2000, and she expanded her practice to Los Angeles, California in 2014, where she obtained her second LCSW license in California in 2016. She's been additionally certified in EMDR Level 1, Reiki Level 2, and as a thought coach through the Institute for Transformational Thinking in Los Angeles, California. So welcome to the show, Lisa Tahir.
Marianne, thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate being with you and our listeners.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. And I have to ask, I got to tell you, I was asking a lot of questions. It's like, what is this? So what is the Chiron Effect?
The Chiron Effect, I wrote it from the perspective of a psychotherapist, Marianne. I've been a therapist for over 20 years, and I came to a place in both my professional and personal lives where I felt some frustration with just rehashing the same traumatic and hurtful memories in therapy. And, I was just asking in meditation, what is beyond this familiar story that we know about ourselves, and having an awareness that we habituate typically the same people, places, and things. That's our routine, as we call it. And asking, how can I expand and grow and really inhabit a new orbit, even in my life, of new people, places, and things? And that's when it came to me to research Chiron, who you may know as the wounded healer archetype that Carl Jung has written about in his work. Chiron is also, in Greek mythology, the centaur who was the founding father of the healing arts, of botany and of pharmacy in that tradition. And Chiron is an astrological placement in our birth chart, I came to learn, in astrology. And so I see astrology as a symbolic languages, articulating some of the patterns that we have. And when I looked more closely, I saw that Chiron illuminates one of 12 areas of vulnerability or core wounds that tend to cause us to live in certain ways based on what we believe to be is true for ourselves. And I've learned that by challenging those beliefs, by changing the beliefs we have about ourselves, we can start to live in a new frequency, inhabit a new orbit, and really heal ourselves from those vulnerabilities and wounds through empathy and self-forgiveness.
How empowering is that? And I love how you bring this, you have such a unique perspective that you bring to the table on this. And one I don't think people have really explored before, but it makes so much sense.
Thank you.
So I know that you coined a new term when it comes to blending these two modalities together. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that.
Sure. The word psychoastrology is what you're referring to. And I define that to be where our personal psychology meets our natal astrology. And so, though I'm not an astrologer, I do see the value of astrology as being a diagnostic point to help us understand what our main area of vulnerability is. And this is the area of our life that we tend to hide or edit from others. We might not want people to know, for example, that we have low self esteem because we might be outwardly very high performance based people, but inwardly feel like it's never enough. And so that's what I mean by the core wound, the core vulnerability, and what the Chiron effect illuminates. And so psychoastrology, I come from the perspective that we can change. And so the remediation of our vulnerabilities and wounds are through sound psychology and spirituality that I lay out in my book for you.
It's just fascinating how you have all this together. How long did it take you to write this book, and why did you feel like now was the right time for it?
It took 3.5 years of writing and research. And looking back now, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe it was that kind of time period. But I really wanted to contribute something that was evergreen, that would be long lasting down through the generations and the years. Because in my book, there are themes I explore, such as abandonment and neglect, when we feel cut off from creativity, where we feel a disconnection from our peers and have a hard time creating community. So these are things that humankind has always had to cope and deal with and figure out how we make meaning and purpose for ourselves. So I felt like it was really worth sticking to the years of writing and research to offer this book to you.
Well, I'm so glad that you did because I love what you bring together on this. And at what point did you understand, like, finding out what our Chiron is basically also helping us with our core wounds?
I think I realized that pretty early on, just synthesizing the material that Chiron, that even in my own life, I'll be specific. My Chiron is in the sign of Aries. So it's a different astrological sign than your sun sign. Like when someone asks you what your sign is, we typically know what that is. To find our Chiron, there's an interactive website as well as a chart in the book where you can look at your date of birth and place of birth, and find where Chiron is. And so Chiron in Aries speaks to a wounding and one's sense of value and worth. And that really made sense to me, Marianne, because at that point in my life, despite outward success and being a very high performer, an overachiever, I still was left with a gnawing sense of somehow like not feeling good enough. And so that's what this placement addresses, that instead of performance based love and having to prove yourself through achievement, it's really about learning to receive and learning that you're good enough as you are. It's not about what you do that defines your value and worth. It's just that we are here alive and worthy of just feeling good about ourselves. And that helped me start to tease out where I learned in my childhood performance based love and having to do and prove, and the messages that I received in my own childhood to cause me to think that that's how life works. And so I hope that helps you and listeners understand how this is really a practical tool to use so that your life becomes easier. Like it's become easier to know I don't have to work until I'm exhausted to feel like I'm good enough. In fact, that goes against healthy self esteem and value and worth. It's about doing less and feeling just really happy within one's own self.
Yes, what a great place to come from. And then you have the information, people who are reading the book have the information on how to make these adjustments in their lives so that they can be more empowered.
Exactly. I give practical takeaway steps, about 5 or 6 for each sign that Chiron's in, as well as specific affirmations that you can write down and carry around or put on a sticky note inside your bathroom mirror and start to incorporate new beliefs for yourself that then start to change the way your life looks because you're going to take new actions for yourself and upon your own behalf as a result of cultivating these new beliefs.
So, how does someone identify what their Chiron is?
You can either look in the book at the chart or at nolatherapy.com/Chiron, Chiron. There's an interactive portion where it says Find My Chiron, where you can enter in through your computer your date of birth, your place of birth, and your time of birth if you have it. A lot of people don't know their time of birth, and that's okay. That the time of birth generates the house that Chiron is in, and there are 12 astrological houses that correlate to where our vulnerabilities manifest. For example, the first house speaks to your self esteem and your body, the second house correlates to your finances and moral values. The third house relates to communication and siblings and so forth. So that's all in the book to help you really more deeply understand what Chiron has to share with you about yourself.
I was very impressed how your book talked about unconditional love. And I think sometimes people feel like that is an unattainable thing. Maybe our pets have that for us, but that's about it, you know?
That's such a good point that you bring up, Marianne, because in this year, 2021, I've been really looking at unconditional love and what that truly means. And it has to do with loving. It's not about the condition. It's not about when something changes, when a relationship gets better, when a certain amount of money appears, when this happens, then it's not about that. It's loving without the condition, having some acceptance with what is, and really appreciating where we are, taking time to pause and appreciate ourselves and those around us that we care about as being good enough right now. And I see that as a practice, like a daily practice that we can cultivate.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I know a lot of people who've been working on their core wounds for a long time feel like, it's kind of drudgery, where it's like, oh, here they are again. I'm working on my core wounds. Is that something that can really be addressed here?
It is, Marianne. And I had that same feeling like, oh, therapy, people I think often associate therapy with something that's hard, that's painful. And yes, there are those times when you're coming to therapy because you're in distress. Something isn't working out for you, and you're coming to heal that, to learn some new ways of being and living. And sometimes that can definitely feel painful. And yet through that pain and that growth really is the other side. Coming through the other side of that coin is empowerment. And when we really ask what this pain wants to show us, wants to reveal to us, it's always something having to do with our happiness and our joy. And so, by really having the courage to face those parts of yourself, those things that you've experienced, and to really sit with some love and patience with yourself instead of criticism, they start to transform and not hurt anymore. And actually, you can source empowerment. It might lead you to start something new in your life to help even treat that issue or cause. You might choose to start a podcast or write your own book because you have something to offer now, learning what these wounds and vulnerabilities have taught you.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Lisa Tahir in regards to her new book, The Chiron Effect. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Every day, pets are surrendered and abandoned. For these helpless and hurting animals, Paws Humane Society acts as a voice for the voiceless, providing hope for a brighter future. You can make a difference in the life of a shelter pet. Become a humane hero today. Just $10 a month will provide much-needed food, shelter, medical care, and love. It takes a community. It takes heroes like you. Together we can. Together we will. Together we are Paws Humane. Visit pawshumane.org to be a hero in every animal story.
Lindsay Roy's new book, The Gift of Perspective, is a must-read. Lindsay's unique life stories of surviving and thriving after 2 major life challenges is a wonderful companion to start your new year. It's a great guidebook for anyone facing a challenge, big or small, in business or in life. Lindsay's own stories and the anecdotes of those she met along the way help illuminate real ideas in real circumstances, drawing out reflections and actionable takeaways for all. Full of faith, grit, and humor, this book has the power to change how you see things. The Gift of Perspective is available at Amazon, or visit Lindsay's website at lindsayroy.com. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest Lisa Tahir, who's sharing with us her new book, The Chiron Effect. Well, now I'm going to kind of get into a really kind of deep question because I know for our people who are into astrology, they're probably going, okay, so we've got the Chiron core wound in our astrological sign for our birth charts. And then we also have it in our birth house. What's the difference between the two of them?
Sure, that's a great question. And so Chiron in a sign gives you one of 12 core woundings. And that's, like I said, Chiron in Aries, a core wounding in your value and worth. Chiron in Taurus, core wounding by neglect. Chiron in Gemini, core wounding and empathetic attunement. And there are 12 of these general areas. And I see it on a spectrum from core wounding to vulnerability. This might have been a core wound at one point in your life that was really debilitating emotionally, but maybe because you've chosen to be in the healing professions or even be a podcaster or do something of service, you've naturally started to heal that. I've discovered that a lot now in talking to people. They're somehow healing this core wound without even knowing it. And it can just really help to know that because it gives you a greater sense of ease that you're really on your path. And so that's Chiron in an astrological sign. Chiron in a house, an astrological house, is the area of your life that the core wounding manifests. For example, the seventh house has to do with relationships and partnerships, both marriage and business. The eighth house has to do with transformation and things like recycling and spirituality and really wanting to know how life works, philosophy. And so this helps you understand the area of your life that it manifests. If it's in your intimate relationship or is it in the work setting? If it's in the 10th house. Does that help clarify?
It sure does. Thank you for going through that because I know a lot of people are going, okay, so how does this all come together and work for me? And I know your book really explains it very well. And I appreciate you taking the time to go over that with us.
Oh, you're so welcome. It helps to know what you're getting into, before getting the book to feel if it resonates for you, which I hope it does.
Oh, without a doubt. And and you touch on so many things too. You touch on the chakra system, you touch on dealing with grief and anger. And so how does some of this come into play when we look at the chakra system with the Chiron effect?
I appreciate that question because it's something that I discovered accidentally, so to speak, in my research and writing the book. When I was discussing core wounding by abandonment, which is Chiron in the astrological sign of Cancer, I thought about how that core wound really has to do with grief and loss. You're grieving the loss of a connection, of a relationship, of never having possibly, a caretaker, a parent that was there for you in the way that you needed. They abandoned you at some level. And I got to thinking how, when we've lived enough life, we've all experienced where we feel abandoned or have actually been abandoned in some way. And I started to think of the chakra system when I interviewed author David Kessler. He wrote the book on grief and loss with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who first identified these stages in the 60s related to death and dying. And I interviewed David Kessler on my All Things Therapy podcast and talked to him about seeing these similarities, the 6 stages of grief correlating to the 7 main chakras. And he gave me permission to write about this and put it in my book, which was just such an honor because I wanted to combine those stages with some spiritual takeaways when we're dealing with grief and loss for readers to be able to use whenever that might happen in their lives.
Yeah, and you can see it come together when you talk about the throat chakra and acceptance. And it's like,
Yeah.
ooh, I could see that.
Well, yeah, when we get to that stage and we cycle through the stages of grief in no particular order, we just roll through them based upon where we are and ending, as David just added, the 6th stage of grief, making meaning, and the throat chakra resonating with the acceptance stage, where we start to be able to tell the story like, okay, this person really did live a full life and I miss them, but they really did so much here of meaning and value that I can start to have some acceptance over the passing of them, their transition. And it just is a different way, I think, of looking at grief and loss.
Well, it's something we all have to move through, and to have such a great resource to help us do that. Because I know a lot of people who may be empaths or intuitives are kind of looking for a deeper way to connect, with this kind of, with their feelings and what they're going through. And I felt like your book really not only talks to them, but talks to everybody to allow them to look at this in a new way.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much, Marianne.
Thank you. Well, and I know that you've got so much great information in your book. Was there something that surprised you when you did your research?
What's been surprising is as I've been speaking about the book and sharing it and asking people what's their experience with the material, how accurate it is. That there's been almost 100% accuracy with people identifying with this area of vulnerability, with the specific core wound that comes up for them. And it's been like these aha moments for people that can bring you a lot of peace, because I know, being a therapist, clients have come in sometime just feeling like something's wrong with them. And there were times in my life where I felt like, what's wrong with me? And that's such a debilitating question, to feel like there's something wrong with you, because there isn't. We've all had experiences that we don't know how to cope with, or we don't understand. So the situation doesn't make sense, but we always make sense. So knowing that my book has been a tool to help people self-soothe and make sense of things has been just really wonderful.
Yes, without a doubt. I mean, I love how you have like Chiron and Gemini, and it really kind of breaks down some of the wounding and healing. So people can look at that and go, oh, okay, I identify with this. I can understand, I'm feeling this, what's going on. I feel like I'm not being seen or heard. So these are some of the things I want to work on.
Thank you, Marianne. And even there's the converse side of this coin, meaning that, for example, Chiron in Gemini, a core wounding and empathetic attunement, where you didn't feel like you were heard or understood growing up. So you feel kind of like, oh, this, it doesn't feel good when you feel like people aren't getting you, they aren't understanding you. And so by healing this wound, because people even like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the singer Rihanna, they have their Chiron in Gemini, and look at how powerfully they've learned to communicate their messages and they are seen and heard truly in their full power. And so this can happen for you too, by healing this wound. And conversely, if you choose to not go there, you can be treated in ways that you don't desire. For example, the Chiron and Gemini unhealed is a person that's very boastful, that's very arrogant, that comes across as a know-it-all. And I'm sure for that person, it doesn't feel good to feel like people are thinking you're a know-it-all. But that's what happens when we don't heal these wounds. They take like a life of their own and can sabotage the relationships that we truly want to have. So it is important to look at yourself in this way, so that you can really be who you want to be and receive that love and acceptance.
So, what are some tips for our listeners so that they can build that healthy foundation and, get started today?
I lead you through in my book in that very way, Marianne, to start with creating the container for change, is how I phrase it, where just get in an emotional mindset when you come to the book that I'm going to set aside, say, 15 or 20 minutes. It doesn't need to be an hour to go through the book, have a journal, light a candle, even if you want to formalize this as like your healing and time of introspection, and just go through the book with an open mind to reflect back on your own memories, on things that you remember about growing up, and the meaning you made about life, the meaning you made about yourself, so that you can start to really, you can keep what you love about those memories and experiences, and start to shift what you don't like and what hasn't worked for you.
Yeah, and start moving that out. Well, it's interesting when most people think about core wounds, they think, those are in people. But can cities and countries and even like global consciousness have core wounds?
Yes, and even relationships, your relationships, your LLC, your business, the date you started your business. I got really excited, Marianne, when I discovered, for example, I put in the date that I started my LLC and was like, what is, if there is a vulnerability in my business, what is it? And it came out to be the a vulnerability in contracts, the area of contracts. And at that exact moment, I was actually in a battle to try to get out of a contract that I didn't read well enough, that I just skimmed over. And it was like this big aha moment. Like for me, it's really about reading contracts and understanding them before I sign them and asking questions if I don't know. So you can use this in your business, you can use it in your relationship, the date you got married or your first date, whatever resonates. And even in countries like the United States and the Declaration of Independence and, where Chiron is in the chart of our country. And it really starts to illuminate patterns, which I think it's so helpful to know our patterns because then we can start to change things and become more optimal in our living.
Well, I think it gives people some hope that they can be more involved, especially when we look at it as in a country or planetary scale, as far as being able to go ahead and address core wounds. And I'm sure that people feel like, okay, I can make an impact by, addressing this.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So, what final thoughts would you like our listeners to take away from your book? And my goodness, I mean, I don't want to give too much of it away. You have so much great information in here. But what final thoughts would you like to leave with our listeners?
What I'm thinking right now is in my book I discuss the value of meditation, of a meditation practice, and that's something that I started about 4 years ago around the time when I began writing this book, and it's become such an important time in my day in the mornings to sit down with my coffee and close my eyes before I answer an email and just kind of breathe and notice whatever sounds are around me and just allow it to be, and really asking for guidance through my day, sending love through my day in a meditative sense and to everyone I'm going to encounter and the people I care about. And that time has become very sacred and special to me. And I feel like it sets the tone for whatever arises in the day. I'm in a better place to address it. And if something happens that I'm not sure how to handle, I'm able to take that pause again instead of reacting as much as I used to. And I think people are really craving that, Marianne, like how to be less reactive and more responsive and more intentional. So I just leave listeners with consider a meditation practice daily if you don't have one. And if you do, to set an intention for your day to really send love to yourself and to everyone and everything, and just start to notice how life starts to greet you and meet you and those subtle changes to bring you happiness and more fulfillment.
What an empowered world that would be, right? So,
Yeah,
everyone coming
absolutely.
from that place. Well, and if someone is going, gosh, I've got the book, I listened to this discussion, I want to be a little bit more involved, what can they do?
I'd love to work with you as your therapist, as your practitioner, as a coach, to reach out to me at nolatherapy.com, the abbreviation for New Orleans, Los Angeles therapy. And I've also started a monthly meditation on Zoom for the new moon, which is a time of new beginnings. So if you reach out, I can send you that Zoom link. It's also on meetup.com. If you look under Chiron guided meditation, it'll come up, but I'm happy to provide that to people and just really help you achieve your goals in an easier way.
Well, my goodness, Lisa, I mean, we could talk for hours. I just love your work. I think you're so inspiring.
Thank you.
Why don't you share that email, that website one more time?
Sure. It's nolatherapy.com, NOLATHERAPY.com. And I can be found on social media on Instagram and Facebook at the same NOLA Therapy. And my podcast is called All Things Therapy, everywhere podcasts are found.
Well, I love your podcast. I've listened to quite a bit of it, and
Thank
you've got
you.
some great information. Yeah, you've got some great information there. So I highly suggest everyone go and check that out too. Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
And thank you for having me on Moments with Marianne. This has been awesome.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Chiron Effect: Healing Our Core Wounds Through Astrology, Empathy, and Self-Forgiveness. The Chiron Effect is available to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.